I could have never guessed that that interview would stir up so much controversy.
All the issues with women's basketball leadership were revealed in a single CNN interview. Sheila Johnson, the owner of the Washington Mystics, believed it was wise to attack Caitlin Clark, but she was mistaken.
I don't even know that lady's name. I would have never known that lady until she goes on CNN and goes on a 4-minute rant.
Now that basketball analyst Rachel DeMita has taken over, the fallout is rocking the WNBA to its foundation. This is about more than just Clark anymore. It's about the future of women's basketball. Let me recap what actually happened to start this whole controversy last week. Time magazine did what many thought was obvious. Caitlin Clark's influence on basketball is straightforward, but not for everyone.
That was honestly just one of the stupidest things that I've ever heard, and I can't believe somebody like that is owning a sports team if they're basically saying everyone needs to get recognition. Like, it just gets to a point, you guys, where you have to look at some of these people's opinions and just stop arguing with them.
Sheila Johnson, owner of the Washington Mystics, thought this was the ideal time to appear on CNN. Although most people had never heard of Johnson before this interview, she made sure that during her 4-minute appearance on national television, everyone would remember her name for all the wrong reasons. Johnson began what can only be described as a perplexing criticism of Clark's acknowledgement, claiming that concentrating on Clark somehow devalued other players, especially in women's basketball. Ironically, her remarks ultimately devalued the league she represents.
I would get more out of arguing with a wall than trying to argue some of these people's points online. The unfortunate part about all of this is that a lot of these people with these really strong and really dumb opinions unfortunately happen to work within the WNBA or be a part of the WNBA.
Johnson's suggestion that sports awards should be given more fairly, without mentioning merit or acknowledging record-breaking accomplishments, raised eyebrows during an interview. It was a bizarre argument that basically boiled down to everyone receiving a trophy, but this is where things get interesting. Rachel DeMita, who is renowned for her frank analysis and in-depth knowledge of basketball, wasn't going to allow this to happen in a video that went viral. DeMita used her platform to methodically dissect why Johnson's perspective wasn't only incorrect, but also potentially detrimental to women's basketball.
If she casted her entire league in a negative light and turned off more people to watching the WNBA.
DeMita cited the data, which show that when Caitlin Clark performs, arena sells out in terms of TV ratings. Social media skyrocket explosions. She's not just playing basketball, she's changing the way that people watch women's sports. We're talking about college games during the regular season attracting NBA-level attendance, which elevates the sport as a whole without demeaning anyone. Johnson received swift and harsh criticism from former players. The obvious discrepancy between WNBA leadership and the realities of contemporary basketball was pointed out by commentators and fans. One WNBA player, Lexi Brown, even defended Clark before deleting her social media accounts, most likely as a result of internal pressure.
There has been no players that have come out and said anything against it besides one. There was one player, Lexi Brown, shout out to her. Her tweets are now private, so I don't know what kind of backlash she was getting. But she kind of came to Caitlin Clark's defense and kind of the defense of like, what are you even saying? Basically what I'm saying, this is so dumb. Why would you even say that? Why are we taking steps backwards?
Rather than embracing Clark's ability to improve the entire sport, this entire incident revealed a concerning pattern inside the WNBA's executive structure. Her success appears to be a threat to some. It seems as though they are playing defense against their own future star. Consider this. Clark is breaking records that have stood for decades, averaging numbers that make statisticians shudder. And more than that, she is attracting new fans to women's basketball who aren't just casual viewers, but are spending money on tickets, merchandise, and other sports-related activities. Another revelation from Johnson's CNN presentation was that there is a generational disparity in the ways that leaders perceive women's sporting achievement, while younger voices like DeMita see that rising tides raise all boats. The old guard appears to be mired in a worldview of scarcity, as if one player's success must come at the price of others. The WNBA's timing couldn't be worse. Rather than getting ready to take advantage of this momentum, Clark is anticipated to join the league the following season, maybe as the most marketable rookie in its history. Some league leaders are causing needless controversy. This is about the WNBA's readiness to enter a new era, not simply about Caitlin Clark anymore. At this pivotal juncture, the league must decide whether to welcome change and expansion or to oppose the very factors that could propel it to new heights. DeMita explained why praising individual achievement benefits everyone in her defense of Clark, not just one player. More views translate into more sponsorships, which in turn translate into higher compensation. More opportunities for all players result from higher wages. A more extensive discussion regarding leadership in women's sports has been spurred by the incident. As they watch how individual stars like Clark can elevate an entire sport, much like Serena Williams did for tennis, current players are privately questioning whether league leadership understands modern sports marketing. What's especially notable is how Johnson's remarks seem out of step with the business reality of sports. Star power drives growth. The NBA recognized this by working with Michael Jordan. Serena Williams had a huge success in tennis, but now a WNBA owner seems to be opposing the very thing that could propel her league to new heights. The fallout from Johnson's remarks didn't end with DeMita's response. It set off a domino effect that led to world sports analysts, who don't often cover women's basketball, suddenly talking about WNBA leadership. The topic of discussion moved from Clark's accomplishments to the more significant query of why a league owner would attempt to minimize a potential clips contrasting Johnson's CNN interview with real footage of Clark's impact flooded superstar social media platforms. As Johnson discussed how unfair recognition is, videos showed crowded arenas, merchandise lines extending around buildings, and young girls holding signs resembling those of Caitlin. This situation is made even more bizarre by the fact that women's collegiate basketball is currently seeing unheard of growth. At the heart of this rise are rising ratings and attendance records that are being broken. Caitlin Clark, yet this WNBA owner seemed uneasy about her achievement. As a former player and current pundit who understands both the business and athletic aspects of basketball, DeMita's defense struck a chord because it was straightforward. The statistics support the idea that Clark's success goes beyond personal accomplishments and involves giving all women in basketball opportunity. When Clark plays, audience size frequently doubles or triples. These viewers aren't simply basketball aficionados. Many of them are new to women's basketball, stay to watch other games, follow other players, and develop an interest in the sport overall. However, Johnson's remarks exposed a more serious problem. Some WNBA leaders seem to see women's basketball as a zero-sum game. If Clark gains attention, they assume others must be losing out. This mindset could hinder the league's growth at the exact moment when it has the greatest chance to grow. Instead of figuring out how to take advantage of Clark's entry into the league, leaders like Johnson are causing controversy rather than generating excitement about how Clark might compete against WNBA talent. Instead, they are dividing the league. This leads us to the crux of the issue. The WNBA needs new leadership positions that comprehend modern sports marketing, social media's influence, and how to capitalize on star power while growing the league as a whole. Johnson's remarks suggested that she might not be that individual. In addition to defending Clark, DeMita's reaction offered a vision for the future of women's basketball. She discussed how recognizing excellence motivates the next generation and how young athletes are inspired to push boundaries by seeing others do so, which is how sports develop. The WNBA has been forced to answer some awkward questions as a result of the scandal. Before Clark joins the league, a number of WNBA players have privately voiced concerns about the state of affairs, arguing that Clark's success is good for everyone in women's basketball because more attention equals more sponsors. How can a league grow if its leaders appear unwilling to change, and why aren't they seizing what could be their biggest marketing opportunity in years? Improved TV agreements and, eventually, more player compensation, all of it is at risk from Johnson's remarks as this story develops. One thing becomes evident. Whether some leaders like it or not, women's basketball is evolving. Players like Clark are expanding the sports fan base and challenging preconceived notions. The ball is now in the hands of the WNBA. Will they embrace this shift and capitalize on this momentum, or will they allow antiquated beliefs to hold them back? Among others, Rachel DeMita has demonstrated there is a better way forward. The league must determine whether they are prepared to follow that course. This dispute could prove to be a game changer for women's basketball. Sometimes it takes a crisis like this, when the leadership appears out of touch, to bring about the adjustments that are required. What happens next may determine the sport's future, but here's what makes this whole situation so intriguing. Two opposing viewpoints emerged in response to Johnson's remarks. While largely remaining mute in public, current WNBA players have expressed their opinions in private group chats and team meetings, stating that they believe Clark's possible arrival into the league would revolutionize sponsorship opportunities, salary exposure, and exposure. When Iowa played South Carolina earlier this season, the game drew 6.5 million viewers, numbers that would make many NBA regular season games envious. This isn't just a statistic. It's evidence that women's basketball can garner mainstream attention when properly marketed. The league's old guard, represented by players like Johnson, appear to be stuck in a defensive stance, fighting battles from 20 years ago when women's basketball struggled for any recognition. However, that's not today's reality. The sport has changed and the audience has become more sophisticated. Rachel DeMita made a wonderful point in her comment, pointing out how other sports leagues would go to great lengths to promote a celebrity like Clark. She also compared the NBA to trying to minimize Steph Curry's influence or tennis decline. The most significant aspect of this dispute is that those leagues recognize that celebrity power promotes growth, thus Gol's appeal wouldn't occur. Even WNBA owners who might agree with Johnson chose to remain silent, acknowledging that it is not a good idea to attack your future star player. Business marketing experts have called this a hugely missed opportunity, and rather than creating welcome campaigns or strategic partnerships, the league is currently dealing with self-inflicted drama. When the league struggled for any media attention, former WNBA players have begun to speak out as well. With unprecedented coverage on the horizon, they are watching in disbelief as a team owner seemingly tries to dim the spotlight. Some sponsors have privately expressed concern about the league's direction, questioning whether the current leadership understands modern sports marketing. College basketball programs outside of the professional ranks claim a rise in interest in women's basketball. Coaches at high schools discuss how young athletes are practicing Clark's long-range shots. Every aspect of the sport is impacted by this controversy, according to some analysts. One anonymous WNBA player stated that the league cannot afford to have owners who don't understand contemporary sports entertainment. Instead, we need leaders who see opportunities rather than threats. The financial ramifications are also noteworthy. Clark's appointment may draw in new sponsors, enhance TV ratings, and boost ticket sales, but businesses prefer to fund expanding, progressive leagues. Johnson's remark conveyed the worst conceivable message. Duration since the NBA's inception, sports media coverage has changed significantly. Social media streaming services and shifting consumer preferences have opened up new avenues for women's sports. As the dust settles on this dispute, the leagues that adapt thrive while those who oppose change are left behind. One thing becomes evident: the WNBA cannot afford to pass up this opportunity. More than just a gifted athlete, Clark is a symbol of women's basketball's future. How the league handles this circumstance will determine whether or not they are prepared for that future.